Now, in celebration of Women's Month, Hawaii remembers its last monarch who upheld her lifelong conviction for peaceful, nonviolent protest, even when faced with defeat and humiliation. For more, we have three of our lady correspondents from Hawaii Pacific, Mio Acenas, Arianne Torres, and Charmaine Cirera with that report.
Well, she remains one of the most important figures in our history. Leo Kalani was a very tolerant monarch.
The measure of a leader can be determined by how they handle defeat, and no better was it shown than by the Kingdom of Hawaii's only ruling queen and last sovereign, Liliuokalani.
She presided over a very, very difficult time in Hawaiian history when her people, the indigenous peoples of Hawaii, the Native Hawaiians, were at incredible risk of cultural and even physical extinction.
How she handled defeat is tied to the concept of kapu aloha, a Hawaiian term that preaches nonviolence in protests.
We can't go back on history, but we can go back and recognize the people that found the best solution that they could under the circumstances for their people, for their cultures, for their vision. And I think that that's what she did. You know, she was dealing with the realities of a very difficult situation.
Kapu aloha. The phrase has been credited to her for the way she handled her removal from the throne and the subsequent annexation of the islands to the United States.
There was change in the world. That was a time of great activity by our country out there in the world. What was part of our country's coming of age, but had such devastating consequences to a lot of the world, especially to indigenous peoples, indigenous cultures, and that was true here.
January 17, 1893, American Henry E. Cooper, accompanied by the U.S. military, addressed a crowd assembled in front of the Royal Palace to proclaim the end of the Hawaiian monarchy and the formulation of a provisional civilian government.
They introduced the Marines and some of the sailors off the ship and surrounded the Iolani Palace. But because Leo Kalani did not want any bloodshed, the defenders of the Iolani Palace put on their arms. At that time she was in power, so she didn't want to see bloodshed, and she felt that she didn't want any upheaval in her kingdom.
Despite being afforded multiple opportunities to rise up against the Americans, Liliuokalani remained steadfast to her conviction for nonviolence.
We always going to disagree about something, but let us not go violent.
In 1895, Queen Liliuokalani agreed to formally abdicate her throne and was subsequently placed under house arrest at Iolani Palace. Liliuokalani continued to protest against annexation of the islands, which eventually occurred in July 1898. In that same year, she published her autobiography and composed the world-famous song Aloha Oi, translated as Farewell to Thee. In 1993, on the centennial anniversary of the kingdom's demise, President Bill Clinton signed a joint resolution of Congress formalizing the federal government's apology for actions taken against the people of Hawaii.
She maintained her commitment to her people, her dignity. She remains very, very relevant today, and she's entirely worthy of celebration in this Women's History Month, along with many other women of Hawaii.
Reporting from the Big Island of Hawaii, this is Charmaine Cirera.